This week on OMG MotoGP, well, one of the dynasty, the Mackenzie dynasty, has joined us to talk all things his career and, of course, Grand Prix as well, British Superbikes, everything that we can get soaked up into the next 45 minutes. Taylor Mackenzie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's been a while since I've seen you, Keith.
Glad you did your hair. I didn't do mine.
Yeah, I'm just making the most of it while I've still got it because I don't know where. Looking at my father, I haven't got many days left, so I'm just enjoying it while I can.
Do you know what? It's funny, isn't it? I kind of these things. I mean, obviously I'm old, so therefore I can say these kind of things. But your dad, I've had a long experience with your dad, and obviously socially with your mum as well for so long. I can't believe your dad is 62 years old now. It's incredible.
I know. Yeah, I know. You'd think he'd start acting like it. Well,
Never.
He's yet to age at all. He still does 5K park runs every week. He's like, yeah, he's not slowed down. And he's still talking about, I don't know if my mum knows this, she probably won't watch this, so it doesn't matter. But he's still talking about maybe racing this year too, as well. So he's still, he's well involved in racing and no intention to slow down.
We'll talk about family in a bit, that's for sure, because obviously, first of all, I want to talk about you. Whereabouts in the world are you at the moment?
I'm currently in Barcelona. It's the World Superbike event this weekend. So this year I've moved into helping my brother. I don't know where it all went wrong. Suddenly the older brother's become the little brother's slave. But I must say I'm actually really enjoying it. It's been a good experience doing that. So it's World Superbike this weekend. And yeah, I'm just here a day early. We've got a day to relax today and then we're at the track tomorrow.
Tough track and tough job for Taron at the moment, actually, I've got to say. So it's good that you're on side with him. I see this week as well, they've just signed Mick Shanley has come across as well to help out. So the big guns are out to get Taron on track, it would seem.
Yeah, it was a tricky job. It's obviously a tricky time for Honda at the moment and across all classes, not just World Superbike. So even the HRC factory team are having a tough time at the moment. And Taz jumped in at Phillip Island. It was a little bit tough. He didn't have a lot of testing going into that race. He also had a Spanish crew chief at that first race. And I'm not sure if there was a little bit of language barrier. He was a nice guy, but it wasn't quite gelling at the first round. Mick was already in the team as a technical director. And the team asked if he would step across to be Taz's crew chief. And we love Mick. He's a really good guy. Great for Taz, having someone that's English speaking in your corner. And just the whole atmosphere improved immediately because we all get on, we all have a laugh together. And there was no second guessing what other people are trying to say and that side of it's all gone. So they had a test last week in Barcelona and it was really productive. In 2 days of riding, he made far more progress over those 2 days. And by the end of the test was less than half a second off the factory bikes. So it was a really good step forward. It's filled Taz with confidence, filled Mick with confidence, and me too. It's just really nice to be involved in it because you can actually see progress now. We're moving forwards and really for Taz, all he has to do is try and get as close to the factory bike as he can. That's his mission this year. And I think in Phillip Island at some point he was 2 seconds off there. So to move within half a second straight away was really good.
Do you think there's a bit of a knock-on effect with what's going on at HRC at the moment, with MotoGP obviously, struggling to a great extent? Yamaha as well, if we want to round up the two Japanese factories that aren't doing quite what we expect them to do in MotoGP. Do you think budgets and focus and the like is loaded towards MotoGP? Does that have a bad knock-on effect to the factory Hondas in World Superbike and therefore then to you guys or to Taron in World Superbikes?
Yeah, it's difficult to know. I actually found out last year, I think, that the Suzuka 8-hour race for Honda has as much weight as the World Superbike Championship. So they spend just as much on the 8-hour race as they do in a season going World Superbike racing, which actually blew my mind. I couldn't believe that there was that much focus on it. So they definitely have things that they're interested in. I can't fault the effort the factory team are putting in. They're still spending a lot of money. They had Nagashima at the last test on a test bike, developing the bike. And at the end of the day, Honda they go racing to win. They're not just going there to turn up and make up the numbers. So I think they will sort it out and it will come good. It's just a matter of, I think we all know now that the Japanese move slightly slower in the way they do things. There's a lot more procedures and levels of staff that things have to go through before it will just get agreed and signed off. Whereas I think that's where we've seen the European manufacturers win recently, just because they're so quick and moving and responding to changes and rule changes, that they're developing faster, and that's why you see the MotoGP guys so far ahead at the moment. But racing always goes in cycles. I don't know, was it 10 years ago, no one wanted to ride a Ducati in MotoGP. Rossi couldn't ride one. It was like the bike you were doomed to ride. And now everyone wants to ride one. You can't sign enough people to ride them. So, and it's the same with Honda. I think it will come in another cycle. There'll be time again where Honda come back to the front. And yeah, it's interesting to watch it.
It's quite subtle, isn't it, the changes? I mean, we spoke to Brad Binder here on OMG MotoGP, and he said that the KTM has improved in every single area, but everybody else has made virtually the same step.
Yeah.
And they're so tight, it's so close.
Yeah. It's MotoGP now is just amazing to watch. I find it frustrating at times to watch it when you hear, like Acosta said at the first race, that he spent the whole race in Marquez's turbulence. And it's like comments like that I hate. I don't ever want to hear a motorbike rider having the moan that he can't sit behind a bike. Like, I don't like that side of it. But it's fascinating how quickly it's developed with the aero packages and how the strides they're making in MotoGP. But I do wonder where it all ends and what happens with it all.
Well, it all ends fairly soon, I would suggest. 2027, when those big rule changes come through. Obviously, with aero, they're going to be rules against them, but it looks like we're going to go to an 850cc bike as well, future in 2027, because of the lead-in time it takes to engineer a completely new performance package. I can see all of that changing, but that's another story. We could go on for a whole hour on that kind of stuff, and really, I want to get back to the Mackenzie story a bit more if I can, because obviously your mum Jan and Neil I've known decades and decades and decades when they first met. You know how all of that began, and how they produced two of the politest young men, I must say, in motorbike racing, in Taron and yourself, Taylor. I have to say that the few times that we've kind of been out or whatever, I'm always embarrassed to get into the subjects that me and your dad might get into. Your mum certainly brought you up.
Yeah, I've heard all the stories, Keith. My dad, he hid a lot of his childhood from me for a long time, and then stupidly he brought me into his world, and I made friends with a lot of his friends. And then all of a sudden, my meek and mild dad that I thought was very sensible, suddenly I learned about the real world and what he'd been up to, and being on the roofs of hire cars and stealing cars and all sorts. It turns out he wasn't quite the person I thought he was.
I'll let you into a little quick story, if I may, then. The Salzburg Ring, this is one that you may or may not have heard. I'm not too sure. Christian Eden, who you know quite well,
yeah.
I would suggest. Well, Dad Paul Eden, and obviously Mum to Christian. We're in Paul Eden's truck. And we've had a night out at a pub that's just down the road from the Salzburg Ring. And in between various banter and fun and games that there was, Kenny Roberts, for instance, in the corner, standing on his head, trying to drink a pint uphill while standing on his head. This is the legend, Kenny Roberts, by the way. Your dad's disappeared off somewhere, and with some guy dressed in lederhosen. I don't know what they got up to, but when they came back, they swapped clothing. Neil is now in this man's underwear, and this man is wearing Neil's clothing. So we decided to leave. Cut a long story short. So we're in the Eden truck, and we're looking for Neil. He's disappeared. So we're all crammed into the cabin area of this Fiat, whatever it is, truck back in the day. And as we scan around the car park looking for Neil, there's a row of Mercedes, and on top of one of the Mercedes is a stark bollock naked Neil looking through his legs back at us.
I don't know what it is. He's got a habit of getting naked when he's drunk. I really don't know where that came from.
Well, I've seen him coming out of closets quite literally in someone else's clothing, generally of the other gender.
Yeah.
But in this particular occasion, so he decided, and this will give you an idea of how long ago this was. So he decided he wasn't going to dress. The door opened and Neil jumped in, and there's a big dashboard on his feet, and he laid along across the dashboard. He was short enough to be fit between the windows. And I just remember people throwing items at his parts of his anatomy. It was cassette cases. I think he was hit by a C90 anyway. So that's just one occasion of many we have of the Neil Mackenzie nights out.
Yeah.
I kind of, your dad was, and I don't know whether this runs in the family between you guys as well. I mentioned you're very polite, well brought up lads. And your dad off track, as you kind of alluded to, was quite a mild-mannered fellow. And I can honestly say that there is nobody in a paddock that I've travelled in for hundreds of years, it feels like now, that has had a bad word to say about your dad. He has managed to navigate a snake pit without falling out with people. And I've never quite worked that one out. But on a racetrack, he was a nightmare. And there was nothing he wouldn't do to win. He was one of the most ruthless, determined, the Steve Hislop, Neil Mackenzie days, which are the ones I enjoy the most, were my favourites. Do you have any particular times in life when you watch your dad racing and thought, bloody hell, he's not only is he not the man I expected now later on in life, he wasn't back then either when he was racing.
Yeah, my earliest memories are like the Cadbury's Boost years and going into GSE. He struggled in the Virgin Yamaha and GSE years. They were like his last 2 years where it got difficult. So, and I was obviously getting older by that point. So I remember him being angry in the motorhome at that point. But I can't really remember too early. And the only things, the Cadbury's Boost days I've seen are videos of those races. So I've obviously seen all the big battles and scraps. And weirdly, I don't know why, me and Taz have both been brought up like that. We've both been brought up to be polite and nice people. But on track, we'd never think twice about not knocking people off or things like that. But you want to win, and that's it. We've never backed out of a last lap batter or last lap pass. Like, that's just how we've been brought up as kids. And I think it's even funnier when you watch Taz, because Taz is even smaller and smiley in the paddock, and you would just never imagine that he could be the person he is when he puts his helmet on. But there's been times where we've been in, or Taz especially has been in a few sticky situations on the last laps, and we're just back and laughing about it afterwards, and the whole world's in uproar. But I think we spent so long in our back garden riding bikes with each other and with dads and practicing passing and racing hard, that it just became second nature to us. So it's never, when that happens on track, we don't even think twice about it, because we did it every day in the back garden with each other. And Dad was the worst one out of the three of us. You'd be out in the back garden with him. And I still don't know if he actually can't see you because of his vision, or if he just ignores you on the inside of you and just leans on you. But that's just how we've learned our craft. So yeah, I think for us, it's just second nature to be like that. We never have to think twice about being like that. But we don't do it in an angry way or a horrible way. It's just, we want to win.
Did you, I mean, like, obviously, dynasties, there are some family dynasties around that, the Mackenzies, the Robinsons, we can go to the Labertys and so on. There are lots of different family dynasties around. I mean, did you ever feel under any kind of pressure to perform? I mean, your dad was an incredible competitor and a very determined man for as long as I can remember. Did you ever feel, you or Taron, for instance, ever feel pressure?
Yeah, it's weird because it took me a long time. So when I first started racing when I was 12, 13 years old, I got this question a lot. But me as a 12 and 13-year-old, I didn't know my dad through the 80s and 90s. I hadn't seen him race. I didn't understand who he was or what he'd done. And it was only when I got in my 20s, really, I could actually appreciate what he'd been through and his success. So for me, I was no different, in my mind, I was no different to any other kid that was going racing. It was only the same pressure that any other dads had for, they want to see your kid do well. And in fairness, our dad was the complete opposite to a lot of racing dads. We were very fortunate. He wasn't bothered if we raced or not. I think because he'd had success himself, he didn't need us to succeed to feel validated. Whereas I think there's a lot of parents out there don't quite make it and then force their kids into racing to sort of live their dream through them. And we didn't have that. So I genuinely didn't feel pressure from that side of it. We enjoyed going racing. We liked riding our bikes. And I used to see, it was actually funny because before social media, there used to be forums and people would go on these forums. And when I was 14, I used to get abused on these forums all the time. And so I actually became quite hardened to online abuse and stuff like that from an early age, because there would, and now as an adult, I totally get it. I understand there was people angry that I was a little kid getting all these opportunities in racing because of who my dad was. But the reality was we were just a family like any other family going racing. We were still scratching around trying to find sponsors. Of course, we had other opportunities that made it easier with some people because Dad knew people within the industry, but none of my rides or anything we did in racing came from anything but us having success on track. And a lot of the time I was running around myself, finding sponsors and making ends meet for us to go racing. So I used to find it quite funny when I'd have these angry people on the internet abusing me, but that was sort of the only sort of pressure from it I felt, that I would get these people being angry on the internet.
It's the side of things that I hadn't considered in your case, because you are of that era where social media and the like really came to the fore, where all of that unfiltered angriness and abuse and the like, all of the things that seems to be slowly but surely being squashed out of it nowadays, or as much as we can do with legislation and the like. But right at that beginning, that time that you would have been growing up through that, it must have been like the Wild West in digital media and the like, when everybody was having a go at each other. And I hadn't considered that might have been the situation for you.
What was more bizarre was there was one called the BSB Forum or something along the lines of that. I don't think it still exists. And people could hide behind another name on there, so there'd be all sorts of names. But what was daft was, through reading the comments and looking at certain things they said, I could figure out who certain people were. And some of them were other kids' dads that were supposedly our friends that were on there slating us. And that was where I really learned a lot about racing, and it is unfortunately a snake pit. And the thing I've learned about racing is that, or the way I try to think about it, is everyone is just there because they're trying to do their best and they want to win, and it is win at all costs. There's a lot of money on the line, and it's quite difficult to actually have friends in racing because you have been backstabbed a lot of times where someone's after your rides. But it's absolutely fine. That's part of our sport, because you have to accept that, because it's sink or swim really. And if he doesn't try and steal your ride, he's not going to have a ride next year, and that's just part of it. So you have to sort of keep a lot of people at arm's length in our sport. But I learned it from those forums quite early on, when there was someone that would be nice to spy to your face, and then the next minute they're trying to slate you on the internet.
It's funny. I mean, like we've all had to put up with that at some stage. My generation as well. Back in the day, everyone was after your ride, after your sponsors. I mean, people used to be blatantly wandering around taking notes of who was on the side of your bike when you were moving up through it. I do remember your dad, one time talking with him about sponsorship and the like, and he was trying to obviously find. It's bad enough having one son that might be reasonably quick on a motorbike, but when you've got two, you've got the Lowe's brothers. Obviously, they had to work their way through it. Dad and Mum had to put their efforts on the line to get those two into racing, and you two as well. And I remember speaking with Neil about it at one point, and he said, you can't believe how much money it costs, and that doesn't go down well with your dad.
Yeah. It was. My dad always says we went, and because genuinely we first went to a track because I was riding a mini moto in the back garden. We've got I say garden, there's a little bit of a field out the back, about half an acre, and I used to ride mini motos there. And I couldn't get my knee down. And Dad said, if you go to the track, to a go-kart track, you'll get your knee down. I didn't understand the logic in that. Anyway, we went. I got my knee down, and that was all we were going for. But then I quite enjoyed doing it. So then we said we would enter a race. And we went to this first race in a car with a mini moto in the back of the car, a picnic blanket, and I didn't even know if he had any tools. He must have had some kind of tools and a fuel jug. And we got the picnic blanket out, put the mini moto on the picnic blanket, and within 5 minutes it started raining. So we were in a mad panic. Luckily, a kind family, the Waddle family, took us in, and we went under their gazebo. And then the next thing, Dad realised we needed wets, we needed sprockets, we needed chains. And he says he was the first guy at the van buying all these spares and all this stuff for a mini motor, and that's where it started. It went from just being a cheap little hobby that we're just going to do the odd practice session to the next thing we were in the 125 World Championship.
Well, I mean, the problem, I suppose, as well is that with your dad, because of the experience he had, and the same thing with anybody that's got a racing dad, they already have the data in their head. They know what you really need to move it forward, and that in itself is quite expensive. I mean, moving back to rather Taron and yourself, I mean, let's stick with that for the moment. I mean, you've both obviously been very successful motorcycle racers. Taron is still moving on up there and trying to make it work. Well, he 28, I think he is, isn't he, your brother?
Yeah.
So he's a little bit younger than you. But I was at the track when you announced your retirement. I remember you announced your retirement, which was like, oh, where did that come from? I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know anything about it. And I think a lot of people were in a similar position as to me. And then you went out and won the race, which was like you weren't finished as in because you couldn't do it anymore. You had made a decision to stop racing at the top of your game. I mean, what actually brought that on? What made you feel the need to do that at that point?
It's weird. So I started racing when I was a kid because I loved racing, built my way up. I was determined I wanted to race bikes and make a living out of it, and that's where I got to. So in 2012, it was sort of all on the right track. And then 2013, 14 and 15, I started having quite hard years in racing. I had one podium in British Supersport. In my opinion, I wasn't on the best bikes. I had a tough year on the WD-40 bike that was set on fire, and I've got it written down somewhere, but it broke down 28 times in 1 year. So it was a difficult year. And I was actually at my wit's end then. I thought, I don't know why I'm doing this, because the difficult thing for me was I would sacrifice absolutely everything away from the track. I'd dedicate myself and give it absolutely everything. And where I was struggling to cope with it was I'd get to the track and the team or whatever hadn't prepared themselves as much as I had. And I really struggled with that because I was putting in everything I did. And then no matter what you did on these bikes, you couldn't physically do any more. So I was actually thinking, if I put this much effort into something else, I could probably be quite successful at something. And I was at this turning point. In 2016, I told Dad, I said, I want one last year on it, but I want to do it on a bike that I know is capable of winning, because I just want to know for myself. And if I'm not good enough, I'll stop, and that'd be that. So 2016, I won the Superstock Championship, went up to Superbike. And then from 2017 to 2017, I actually broke my shoulder and my foot, and dislocated my shoulder as well. And then it was like, hit a bit of a rock here. 2018, I got on the Ducati, and I just did not click with this Ducati at all. It wasn't the bike's fault or anything like that, team. I just couldn't ride that bike. It was the one bike I genuinely just didn't understand how to ride it. I went to Old Park once on it, and on one of my in-laps, I went across the line. I did a faster lap than I did the lap before when I was trying. I'm like, I don't understand why. It just doesn't make any sense. So 2018, I was actually at a point where I was really hating racing. I was thinking, I can't make this happen on a superbike. I don't understand it. But I was also at this point where I thought, I'm now 24, I think I must have been 25. And I thought, time's gone so fast. I've committed my life to this now. And if I walk away now, this is the point where I can actually make money out of the sport and do it as a job. No matter how much I hate it and I'm not enjoying it and then find it hard, I need to stick it out. So I told myself I'd do 5 more years, no matter what, no matter how hard it got, how many injuries, I would just do it. And I never told anyone. That was just what I told myself in my head. So 2018, I got back. Badham's actually bailed me out, and I started winning a few races for them. 2019, I finished second in the Superstock Championship. And I was actually back on the path where I thought I was enjoying racing and feeling something from it. But what the weirdest thing for me was 2020 happened and we were in lockdown. And by this point, I'd actually developed quite a lot of stomach issues. I became allergic to loads of foods. I'd lost quite a bit of weight. I couldn't finish meals. And I hadn't really realised this. I was just sort of dealing with it, and I just thought it was part of me and who I am. And then lockdown started, and it was the first time in my life I'd ever forgot about motorbike racing, because we couldn't do anything. There was no tracks open. We were just sat in our houses. And within 2 months of lockdown, my stomach completely went back to normal. And I realised, I was like, oh my God, the stress from racing is what's causing these issues. And I was also feeling pretty rubbish mentally and felt sad all the time. And I didn't know why. I was not a sad person, and I just couldn't get my head around why I felt like this. I just wake up and feel horrendous. And then I did a dog barking, and the dog barking would send me over the edge, and I just like, what is going on? I couldn't understand it. So 2020, I was sort of like in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I don't think I actually want to race, but I'm here now, and I'm told myself I'm doing 5 years, I'm going to carry on going. I'd signed for BMW on the factory BMW bike. Then I was riding in the back garden with Dad, Hodgie and Taz, and I broke my leg. I was doing about 3 miles an hour, tore my MCL ligament and broke the top of my tibia. And then I was like, oh no, like I'm in this place again, I'm not enjoying racing. rode with a broken leg. Got told by the team I would still have a ride next year. Don't worry about it. It's only 6 races because of this lockdown thing. After 2 races, I started hearing rumours that I'd already been replaced for the year after. And I was just like, oh, no one give you a chance here. I physically got a broken leg and I can't show myself. I just wanted another chance. In 2021, this is a long story here, Keith, so I'm sorry you're in.
No, we got plenty of time in a podcast. We got plenty of time.
2021, we came back. I signed for Badham's again on the M1000, and I thought, right, I'm going to win this championship and prove myself. And I was really hoping Michael would take me to Superbike the year after, because I loved that team, loved everything about them. They were great guys. And this is where it got really weird in my head. So I trained like I always had over winter, did all the testing, felt really good. Got arm pump at the first test, so thought I'm not having that. Went and got an operation. So I'm still like committing everything to it. Spent $4,000 to get my arm fixed before the season starts. Bearing in mind, in Superstock, if you win the race, you get £500. I've just spent $4,000 just to fix my arm so I can win £500. So I did the first race. I don't think I broke that record, but I won the race by chunk. Went to the second round at Knockhill, won the first race. Thought, this is easy. We're going to easily win this championship. But what was weird was, when I won the race at Knockhill, I crossed the line, and I just did not feel anything. I was like, this is so weird. This is what I'm training for, and I'm not even enjoying winning now. I just didn't understand why I was doing it. So the second race, I fell off out of the lead, which I hated even more. And the thing that I didn't like about racing so much at this point was, if I'd had a bad result, that result would sit with me for 3 weeks till the next race. Everything would be a problem. I wouldn't like going to the gym, force myself into doing all these things. My stomach would come back. I couldn't eat any food. And so it was kind of at that time, I did 2 more races. We had a few bike problems at that point. I just told myself, if I don't get offered a load of money to go racing next year, which I knew, I was telling myself that because I knew I wasn't going to get offered a load of money. I kept saying, if I get offered a load, I'll stay. And I told myself, if that doesn't happen, I'm just going to stop. So in the middle of the year, I told Dad, I said, I think I've had enough. And he was like, he genuinely went, that's fine. I said, I'm making myself ill. I feel crap all the time. My stomach's doing my head in. I can't eat anything. I've got all these problems, and I know it's caused by racing. And if I stop, it's going to stop. And maybe I said I'll stop for a year or 2 years. I don't know, but I think I've just had enough. So I told my mom, and she was absolutely ecstatic. She couldn't wait. She thought this is the best thing ever. I told a few of my close friends, and some of my close friends, I told the problem I had in my head at the time was, I said, I feel like I'm giving up. And the one thing I'm not is a quitter. Like, all this time, no matter what, I'll keep digging in. I've had horrendous years, injuries, and I don't care what people say about me, but I'm not having people say I quit, because I'm not. And my one friend said, I don't see this as you quitting. I just see this, that you've built all this up in your life. You've got to this point. You've made a bit of a profile for yourself. You've met loads of people. You've opened loads of doors into other things now. It's not quitting. It's just the start of the next chapter. And it kind of justified it in my head a bit, and I sort of felt better about the whole thing. And then I told Rutter, and Rutter was like, that's fine if you're thinking it. He doesn't get it at all, because he's 95 years old and he's still racing. But he also said he doesn't have anything else in his life that he wants to stop for. Whereas I had so many other things I really enjoyed doing, making videos, being on TV, doing punditry stuff. Like, I really enjoy all that. But I was still at this point where I was literally going to stop racing with no qualifications, no job, no anything. It was just, I was turning all these taps off and I was going into the unknown. But fortunately, Michael Laverty got wind from Neil Hodgson that I was going to stop. And he said he was starting his team. Do I want to manage it? So I said, yeah. So I kind of had that then as a bit of something to fall back on. And then I turned up at Donington, and I've never actually told anyone this story because I've just forgot, basically. But it was funny. On the Saturday, so imagine now I'm at the peak. I've got 2 races to go, and I'm at peak of I hate racing. I just want to stop. I'm just literally turning up now to go home. But I'm still giving it everything and trying my hardest. And on Saturday, I was normally pretty good in the wet. I could win most of the time in the wet in Superstock. And for whatever reason, whatever happened with this bike, it was hideous to ride. I couldn't, it was just spinning up, and I was nearly crashing on the straight line. So I pulled in a wet race. It's the first time in my life I've ever pulled in a race, unless the bike had actually broke. I pulled in and I said, I can't ride it. I'm not riding it. I'm going to crash. I've got 2 races left. I'm not hurting myself now, and I've got 2 races left. That's that. So Rutter was like, yeah, no worries. So we're on the scooter back to the camper with Rutter. And I said, do you think we should just stop now? And I genuinely meant, like, what's the point? I've got 2 more races. And he laughed because he thought I was joking. He was like, ah. And I was like, oh, I've sort of said it now. And he's like, the moment's gone. So I went, oh, I better do tomorrow. So I woke up tomorrow, because I'd pulled in, I had to start at the back of the grid. But by some freak, I don't know how we did it, but we just got my bike feeling like it did at the start of the year. And I went on the out lap, and I come round to the grid, I'm like, oh my God, the bike's back to how it was when I was winning these races at the start of the year. And Rutter said, well, I'll bet you 500 quid you won't finish on the podium. I said, all right. And so I came round after the first lap and I was 10th. And then from 30 something on the grid. And then it got about 5 laps in, I could still see the leaders. I thought, I'm going to win this. And so 2 laps to go, I was on a dice with Billy McConnell, and no matter what, there was no way I was going to let him beat me at this point when I come all that way. And then I did my interview at the end of the race, and I was walking down pit lane with Rutter, and he went, do you want to just do it now? He said, there's never going to be a better time to say, I'm stopping. I said, you know what, yeah. So I just had my interview with Rachel Stringer. I said, thanks very much. It's probably going to come as a bit of a shock, but I'm going to stop racing at the end of this year. And that was the end of it. I just walked with my head held high and quite proud of what I did.
Well, you should be bloody proud of what you did. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a long story, but it was worth getting to the end. And the point of it was, with all those trials and tribulations through your career to get to that point, and to have that debate going on in your head while you were coming from the back of the grid to win the race. I remember it was quite a kind of you'd made that announcement, but it was quite a tear-filled kind of event really for all of us. I mean, to see somebody, a mate of yours, son, going through what you'd gone through. But I wasn't sure whether Rutter had tears in his eyes because he had to part with 500 quid. That's probably the hardest part of the entire session. Because he'd been moaning at me that year, actually. I think it was Alton Park earlier on in the year about how much it cost to enter in Superstock, how much money it cost, even though Bathams were sponsoring him, obviously, at the time. Let me rewind that into about the middle of that of your conversation there with the illness that you went through. I mean, I don't think people realise sometimes what you give. I mean, yeah, you see the headlines and you see the injuries and you see, the dedication and the like that riders have to give and what they have to put up with. And if I might, may I ask you if maybe the Casey Stoner syndrome, maybe you had something similar to him, because Casey, they couldn't work out what was wrong with him at one point when he decided to pack in racing, but he kept a recurring illness that they just couldn't get to the bottom of. I mean, it has huge effects on your body just from your mind. Yeah,
I really didn't understand it at all. It happened to me twice. So I was really ill. I was, now I'd say I'm a normal weight now. I'm 72 kilos or 74 kilos. When I was racing at points, I went to 62 kilos because I couldn't physically eat. I thought I was eating. I used to say, oh, this is just me. This is how much I weigh. But when I look back at pictures now, I was actually ill. That I shouldn't have been that weight. And it was through these points I basically became allergic to eggs, blueberries, peanut butter, onions, garlic. If I ate any of those foods, sometimes they're obviously in foods without you realising, it could mean that I couldn't go to the toilet for a week. Like, it was that bad. It was weird. And so a few times I went to the doctors about that. And then also, we get embarrassed to talk about it as men, but just feeling depressed and anxious. And it just wasn't me at all. I didn't understand that. I was also the person that used to go, why don't they just cheer up? I don't understand. But then when you're in that situation, you're like, oh, I get it now. This has got a hold on me and I can't make it stop. So I went to the doctors, and the doctor said, I didn't say what I did as a job. And he said, oh, it just sounds like you just need to stop your job. And it's like the middle of the season. And I said, it doesn't really work like that. Like, I can't just stop my job. And he went, yeah, but you just need to stop. And clearly that's what's causing your issues. I said, yeah, thanks for your help, but like, I can't stop. And I explained what I did. And he said, oh, well, maybe you need to take a break. I said, don't really work like that. Like, there is no taking a break. If you take a break in the middle of the year, your ride will be gone and you'll have no ride next year. And it's literally your job. There's no HR department. There's no one saying, "Oh, we'll let them have 6 months off, and hopefully they come back, and we'll still pay them through that." If you stop racing, that's usually done. Like it's literally as bad as that. And it's amazing when it's going well, but you are basically in charge of your own destiny, and that's sort of what was going on in my head. I realised I couldn't stop, but it was the feeling of not being able to stop and forcing myself into doing something I didn't want to do was causing all my issues.
You're a close family. So Taron and your mum and dad, Neil and Jan, will have been very concerned about you at this particular point. And I would imagine, I mean, listening to you speak, it almost feels to me as an old bloke like it's a modern day thing.
Yeah.
Or is that just the understanding of these things, do you think? You think it's always been there, even in my era, in your dad's era? It's always been there, but we just dealt with it in a different way, or just dropped off the edge of the cliff and no one really noticed.
Yeah, it's hot. I really don't know the answer to that. I know that my dad, like I'd find it hard explaining to my dad because he's come through a different era, and I've been brought up in a macho racing world where the reason I ever spoke about it when I was racing was because if you give anyone any sort of inkling that you've got any kind of weakness, they'll prey on it. So I just acted like I was fine all the time, even when I wasn't. And I didn't even tell my mum or dad or brother, really. I just sort of carried on with it. And I'd had all these problems. And like Lee Johnson's one of my good friends, and we just sort of laugh about my weird stomach and like, oh, well, it is what it is. Like, oh, he's weird. He can't eat all these things. But we never actually thought, probably something quite underlying here why you can't eat these foods. And so, especially in the racing world as well, the older generation, I get embarrassed talking about it because it's not the done thing. We're just meant to be big, hard racers, and we don't talk about things like that. And it's only now I don't race, I don't really care because it doesn't matter. I don't need to beat anyone. I'm only facing myself in the mirror. There's no one that I'm giving an advantage to if I do talk about it. And what's actually baffled me was when I did start speaking about these things on the internet, mainly people my age, lads that race, I would never say who they are, but the amount of people that have messaged me saying, oh my God, I literally go through the same thing. I feel exactly the same. I want to stop. I can't stop. What do I do? And I have to have these conversations with people a lot. Well, it's endless and some really horrible things that happen to people that they speak about to me. And it's just all swept under the carpet because no one wants to speak about it because we can't really. You can't afford to. If you saw an article now saying someone was struggling with depression, every team under the sun would go, whoa, let's back off him because he might throw a wobbler in the middle of the year, or it's just unfortunately the way it is in sport. So it's a tricky subject, and I don't really know what the answer is to it.
Well, it's a tricky subject, and it's getting worse. I mean, from the point of view that, particularly in Grand Prix, which is what we're more about probably on this website, is that, you're seeing more and more events over a longer and longer period. That includes from a television point of view. You're now, helping out in some of the television channels. The point is now that there are huge teams that are having so much more stress to do what was not an easy job, but one that was spread out accordingly through the year. So you've got television crews, hospitality crews, all the background guys that are working their way through all of this from a Grand Prix perspective. 42 races now in something like 17 countries. Crammed into the year. Do you see mental health issues becoming more to the fore and having to be managed more prudently, for want of a better phrase, because I can't think of one at the moment, to get us through this period? Are we going to end up with breakdowns through the year, do you feel? And is that going to have an adverse effect on teams racing in Grand Prix in the future?
It's difficult. Sometimes I feel like I only speak about the negatives about racing. I don't want to just speak about the negatives because Grand Prix racing is amazing. It's an amazing experience. The people in that paddock that get to travel around the world is honestly the best thing in the world. But from a personal side of it, just working in a team for 2 years, the strain that puts on people's families, relationships, it's like people that go and work on the rigs go away for 2 weeks and come back for 4, or they go away for 3 weeks and they come back for 6 or 8. We go away for 9 weeks and then come back and see your family for a week, and then you're off again for 3 weeks. And there is times where you can come back for 2 days at a time, but I saw it firsthand with a lot of people in the teams that I was close with, where people are splitting up. There's houses being put up for sale. We were at one race weekend, and on the Thursday or Wednesday, someone split up with a missus, and by Sunday, his house was on Facebook and had already been sold. And it's these sort of pressures that people don't see, and it's really difficult. People that are away from their kids for a long period of time, and it's fine for a single guy or a single woman that wants to work in that paddock, travel the world, and doesn't have any commitments or ties at home. It's the best thing ever because you get to experience so much. But if you have any kind of life at home, I mean, for myself, I'm 31, and I realised I was either going to carry on doing that and have no life at home, or I was going to stop doing that and explore other things and do other things. That's part of the reason I stopped, was because I want to grow up at some point, have a house and a family, and you're never going to have a normal family or a normal life working in that paddock, I don't think.
Because to reiterate,
go on.
Sorry, I think we should reiterate at this point to anybody listening around the world. Obviously, you were managing MLAV, Michael Laverty's Vision Track Moto3 team for a couple of years, and obviously have a lot of inside input into that and understanding as far as their two young riders are concerned. Just thought I'd say that at that point, just to reiterate to anybody that's listening and wondering quite where you were coming from.
Yeah, and it's actually quite, the riders now, a lot of them do well for themselves, and the ones at the top can take their wife or the girlfriend or their family with them and travel around with them, and that's amazing. But for the mechanics and the staff within the team, you can't take your missus to work. You wouldn't go to her work and sit at her desk with her. So that's where the sort of, I don't know. Some people enjoy that and they want that, but that's definitely the balance that you have to weigh up.
I wasn't sure when I came back after the BT gig, when I got to the end of the Grand Prix for myself, from a broadcast point of view, which, by the way, is dead easy compared with racing, with being in a team. Somebody runs everything for you. Your hire cars, your flights, your accommodation, everything is sorted out by a facilities manager. And Gabriella was ours, and she was brilliant. I don't know whether she ever watches this, but we'll give her a big up, because it was just a fantastic time. Yeah, she is great. But you were aware that you were away from home a lot. I wondered when I stepped off the roundabout whether I'd get back here and my wife would want to divorce me, because suddenly I was around the house more than I'd ever been. In our relationship, which is 22 years old now, I hadn't been at home. We'd be away all of the time. But as it turns out, for me, shockingly, best thing I've ever done. I mean, I did it late in life. You've managed to crack it much earlier on, it would seem, and you've got a lot more. At 31, you've got a hell of a lot of life to go and to enjoy. So where does that take you? I mean, I don't feel like we've really touched much on. I know we've talked about the Superstock and the like, you won it, but you go back to 125s and you've ridden all sorts of classes, so you've got huge experience in these things. I mean, one thing in particular that your dad said to me once: first Grand Prix, you finished 5th at a rare. Hey, the man. So you can obviously ride a motorbike. So it must have been a massive deal to stop when you see the likes of Rossi and people like that going on till they're 42 years old. And I think the longevity is there now because of the way we're looked after. The longevity is there to have gone on much longer. So what sort of took your fancy after your racing career? Where did you head to? What was the idea behind it? Wasn't there?
No, there really wasn't. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew racing was making me ill. And I still, at that point, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to be involved in racing, because I wasn't sure how much of it was causing it, if it was just physically riding the bikes or what. But the second I stepped away, I did 6 months where I didn't ride a bike. And then I genuinely love riding bikes more now than when I did when I raced, because when you race, you're constantly riding, you're constantly doing track days, testing, and the novelty of it wears off. You become so focused on the 1% and trying to make yourself the best you possibly can. It actually takes some of the fun element out of it, because you're so focused on being the best you can be. And it's easy to forget. I used to really try and remind myself, like as an example, and I feel horrendous even saying it, we got a brand new BMW M1000 when it first came out. And I think it cost about 50 grand to build this bike. And the first time I rode it, I remember looking at Rutter and him looking at me going, this is crap. And you think, where did it get to this point? Like, if me 10 years ago got to ride this bike, it'd be the best thing in the world. But because you've gone so obsessed with it being the best it possibly can be, and if it's not quite right as a bike, it's like when GP racers are moaning about riding their bikes. Those bikes, if we got one go on it, it would be the best thing ever, and you remember it for the rest of your life. But when you're racing, it becomes so much about that. So when I stopped racing, I actually really enjoyed riding bikes again. I started trials riding. Now, just to go do a track day, I really enjoy going and riding the bike on track. I've done a little bit of helmet testing for a company called Rock. So I've been going up and down runways with helmets on and figuring out different aerodynamics and things like that, which has been quite interesting. So I said yes to everything, any job opportunity I got. I just kept saying yes and making myself busier and busier and busier. So I've got to the point now where I think I enjoy making videos and doing YouTube stuff. I enjoy doing the TV stuff. I do quite a lot for Eurosport doing, they're called Mac Off Track series, where I go and spend a day with a rider. And that's probably my favourite job that I do, because you get to see the real person. You're not at a racetrack where they're giving you a fake interview where they're just telling you what they think they should say. And I think that's the sort of direction I want to go in my life, whether it's motorbikes or sports or whatever. I think that's what I enjoy the most. But anything around racing, traveling, this year helping my brother, I didn't realise how much I would enjoy that. It's nice because I always have his best interest at heart, and I want to see him do the best I can. And if I'm providing, even if it's 0.5% of that, to make him the best he can be, is really fulfilling doing that job. So that's probably my favourite job I do at the moment, is coming here.
And what about the digital? You're a bit of a digital wizard. I mean, we've sort of touched on it a little bit there, but we've got to go down the road of Mad Mark. Who on earth instigated Mad Mark? Where did that come from originally? We know he is actually mad, aka Neil Mackenzie.
The Mad Mark, for people that haven't seen it, is basically just a Mickey take of racing dads. And it started because I thought it would be a funny video to make for my YouTube channel. I told Dad I'd dress him up as a racing dad, and we'd just have a bit of a laugh, basically, and sort of talk about things that we'd heard people say in the paddock. And so the first episode was all based on truth. It was all things that we'd heard. And people seemed to like it. So he started off with some glasses on, and then the glasses got worse, and the moustache got bigger, and then the glasses became wire around his head, and it's just sort of escalated from there. And he's done all sorts. I think there's about 8 or 9 episodes on it now, and it's actually the point now where he can do pretty much anything and no one even questions it. So, but genuinely, I'd say 80 to 90% of those episodes are genuine things that have come from the paddock. They are racing dads that have said those things. Someone recently, one of the episodes was Mark said, "If you don't go win this race, I'm going to shoot your dog." And that is a genuine thing I've heard within the paddock. So there are, even the most ridiculous things you think there's no way that can be true, they are genuine. And I don't know what it is about Dad, because Dad is not naturally a person that's out there, or he wouldn't be that person at all. He's just taken to it. And I think he actually enjoys being Mad Mark more than he enjoys being himself. He's always asking me, like, when can we do the next one? When can we film? Oh, I'll get ready today, or we'll do this. So he absolutely loves it. And the more it's sort of gone on, the more we keep thinking of ideas. And I genuinely didn't think we'd do more than one episode, but people, it's the most requested thing on my channel is people said, when's the next one coming? So I have to keep thinking of ideas.
Well, you better plug your channel then, so we can all get and look on it. Anyone who wants to look at those episodes.
Yeah, it's just my name, Taylor Mackenzie. I'm making videos about all sorts. So a lot of it was, but it started as the behind the scenes of my racing, and then as it's gone on, tried to give people an insight into all sorts, whether it's sponsorship and racing or teams, riders. And then I do the odd funny video with Mad Mark and just follow my life about the world, basically.
Of course, you do have a lot of quite strange people that come to your house, don't you? To your mum and dad's house, I should say. When you consider the Mackenzie Hodgson insurance bracket to start with, Don Mackay, who's also a partner in that particular enterprise, the insurance company that your dad and Hodgie set up. Hodgie is around your house quite often, and he could easily be a racing dad. I could see him being a Mad Mark 2.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, Mad Mark, I'm not sure Mark Hodgson even knows this. That's where the name originally came from. It was Neil's Mad Mark. Dad? Yeah, Mad Mark. So we used to joke about him being Mad Mark. And some of the early stories were things like, Hodgie told us a funny story once that he was riding motocross and his goggles were steaming up. So they were brand new goggles, and he came round to his dad and got the goggles and fogged up, threw them to his dad mid-race. So he come around the next lap, and his dad threw them straight back at him. And that was one of the Mad Mark stories that originally set it all off. So, yeah, Mad Mark, he's a legend. We love Mark.
So, I mean, as you work through what you're heading for nowadays, I mean, do you pick up inspiration from some of your obviously close friends that are still in the paddock and some of your dad's old friends that are not? I mean, another great storyteller is Rob McElnay, of course, and he's another good mate of your dad's going back. I mean, blimey, you could do a whole series of interviews and sketches around Rob Mack. I mean, he's another one that's hilariously funny.
Do you know what? It bothers me a little bit about our sport is Formula One, the Drive to Survive series is absolutely amazing. I've loved watching every episode of it. Our sport is more unhinged than that. They're quite tame with a lot of the stuff that goes on in that. And if someone could actually make a documentary about our sport, if you saw the dark underworld of a lot of our sport and what goes on behind the scenes, and people actually got to see what goes on, I honestly think it'd be far more successful because it's so much more interesting. And perhaps some of that does happen in Formula One and we just don't see it on there. But I would love, especially, I mean, it's become a lot more tame in recent years because we have to be, because if anyone gets caught doing anything, it's on social media in 2 minutes, there's a video of it and you'll get cancelled. So there's that fear in a lot of people, but especially in the 80s and 90s, and I'm sure even earlier with you too, Keith, like that side of racing, if people actually could tell what went on, just the things that I've heard on the grapevine, and obviously I've never been involved in any shenanigans with any of my life around the paddock.
Be careful.
Yeah, it's a good world, and it's an exciting world to be in.
It is indeed, and I tell you what, I think that Taylor Mackenzie, you are obviously going to be a part of that as it progresses forwards, and I'm sure that you're always going to have a hand in the racing side of things. If the film, actually, you could end up producing some very interesting films or the like as we move forward, documentaries with a little bit of a twist on them, that's for sure. You got plenty of material just in having your dad in it half the time, or as a consulting editor of some kind. We look forward to talking with you more and more as we move through the season. I mean, if we can invite you back later on in the year and get a bit of an angle from how you see the MotoGP year has gone. But I mean, it's been enlightening. Definitely. I don't think people realise just how much motorcycle racers, sportsmen probably in general, I'll say motorcycle racers because they're the only ones I know, what they give personally. And I think you've given us real insight into that. So thank you very much from OMG MotoGP and everybody watching.
Thanks for having me on.